Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. I'm Alberto Trocli from Inside Climate Service and World Energy and Meteorology Council, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar of the Copernicus Climate Change Service series for energy. So this is the third webinar, as we said. We had one week ago on energy indicators. This is the second part of that for webinar 3. And I'd like to just provide a brief introduction about the C3S energy service. Just a brief overview. We'll go into more detail a little later. Just to tell you what the service is about. So the service is about providing indicators for climate and energy at different scales, and which we'll see below. That the indicators are temperature, solar radiation, precipitation, and wind speed. These are the main ones. We also have relative humidity and pressure. These variables are then converted through different type of modelings, some of which we saw last week and others we'll see today, into the energy indicators, which are the PV solar power generation, the wind power generation onshore and offshore, electricity and also energy demand, and then hydropower generation, run-of-river and reservoir. As I said, these indicators are split into 3 timescales or streams. One is the historical, which goes from 1950 to present, covering year 5. We'll likely extend it to 1940 also, with the additional year 5 data that was made available. And then we have the second stream, the seasonal forecast, so covering hindgas periods from 93 to 2016, and then the current forecasts for the past couple of years and beyond. And then the third stream is the projections that covers the period from around 2015 to 2100. So this is the brief overview. I also want to tell you about the format of the webinar. So you'll have seen that your audio and video are deactivated by default. There is also a Q&A section, which you'll find at the bottom, and you can use this at any time to put your questions, and we will either address them verbally at the end during the Q&A session, or during the sessions also we may respond in writing. We may also ask for clarification if some questions is not clear enough, so please be prepared to respond to the queries to your questions. The webinar will be recorded and will be available online as soon as possible after the webinar. So the program for today is the following. We'll have the focus on hydropower and energy demand. Before we do that, we'll have an introduction on the C3S operational service for the energy sector. Before we dive into the presentations, I want to acknowledge and thank our partners in this service, namely Armin, EDF, Everose, and Enel. And I also want to thank the organizers of the webinar, particularly Elena Restivo of ICS, who is behind the scenes controlling everything. So thank you all. We then move to the first presentation by Nube González Reviriego. So Nube, just a few words of introduction. Nube is the service of Technical Officer, excuse me, of the Energy and Agriculture Services at the Copernicus Climate Change Service at the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecast. She holds a PhD in climate and has extensive experience in co-developing and implementing climate services for different sectors, including renewable energy, agriculture, and health, with both private and public institutions. She has participated as a climate services scientist in many national and European projects and is currently involved in the operational delivery of C3S services for the energy sector. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Nube and for the first presentation, and just remind you that we have a slot of an hour and a half for all the presentations and Q&A, and also a poll that will come up after this presentation. Over to you. Thank you, Nube.
Thank you very much, Alberto. I would like to welcome to all the participants in this webinar on the side of the Copernicus Climate Change Service. And for those that are not very familiar with the Copernicus Climate Change, Copernicus is the Earth observation component of the European Union's space program. The main aim of Copernicus is developing services based on both satellite Earth observation and in situ data. And the Copernicus has already implemented 6 services, and one of them is the Climate Change Service, implemented by the European Center for Medium Weather Forecast, ECMWF. A little bit more about Copernicus. So the main aim of the Copernicus Climate Change Service is to support the society by providing authoritative information about the past, present, and future climate in Europe and the rest of the world. If I have to define the Copernicus Climate Change Service in a nutshell, I will say that it provides reliable, open, and free of charge data set. All the information that provide is fully traceable through documentation, workflows, and code available for the public consultation. Then also C3S provide a sectoral application. I will go later on that, but also showcase different uses of the Copernicus climate data for real application in order to inspire other users. And finally, I will say that all the information that we are providing at C3S is quality assured. So if we move, also apart from this highlight, in Copernicus, we have many other activities that might be relevant for the energy sector, as the European State of the Climate, or also the Energy Hub. But if you would like to have more information about that, you can go to and watch the record of the first webinar, the Global Climate Indicator, that is under this website. So basically, at the C3S, we develop application for different sectors, and in particular for the energy sector. Several years ago, we put in place this operational service for the energy sector, which main aim is to deliver climate and energy indicators in an operational way for a broad range of energy users. Currently, you can find the climate and energy indicators of this first phase of the operational services at the Copernicus Climate Data Store. And you can find both climate and energy indicators for Europe, for historical, and for future climate change projection. But we would like to go further on this operational service for the energy sector. And then currently, we are working in the second phase of this operational energy service, which basically we would like to expand from Europe in the first phase to global in this second phase. And we will be providing both climate and energy indicators at a global scale. And something that is also new in this second phase is that we will be improving the conversion models that we are using to pass from climate to energy indicators. And also, we are not only showing historical string, which go from 1950 to present, and also climate change projection, which go from present to the end of the century. But in this second phase, we are including a new temporal string, which is the seasonal forecast, in which we will provide operationally prediction for the forthcoming 6 months. So basically, the climate indicator that we are providing in this second phase will be temperature, precipitation, wind speed at both 10 meter and 100 meter, also solar radiation at surface level, and mean sea level pressure. We aim, when possible, to go to hourly resolution, and then we will provide both gridded data set and also aggregated spatial indicators. And also we are providing energy indicators. We will provide the wind power capacity factor both onshore and offshore, and also capacity factor for solar power. But we will be providing also electricity demand and hydropower, both for runoff river and reservoir. Just before giving the word to my colleague, I would like to present you at a very high level the general workflow of this second phase of the operational services. And basically, we start by doing the retrieval of the climate data from different sources. Here, we reprocessing this data, applying some spatial and temporal interpolation when needed, also computation of the wind speed from the components, and changing units when it's needed. Also, we apply some bias adjustment to those variables and temporal strings in which are needed. And we also obtain the wind speed at 100 meter. And after that, we obtain the gridded climate indicators. These gridded climate indicators will be in NetCDF format, but then we will aggregate spatially, and we will provide those climate indicator aggregated in CSV format, which is a more friendly format for many users. Then coming from the climate indicator, we also use energy data input to include it in the energy conversion models. And then the output of that are the gridded energy indicators in NetCDF format, but also we aggregate it spatially, and we have the aggregated energy indicators in CSV formats. But before doing this aggregation, we apply some exclusion layer in order to avoid those zones in which it's not possible to have installation. And all the data set that we are providing in this second phase of the operational service for the energy sector will be stored at the Copernicus Climate Data Store. And this data will be fully open independently on the downstream application that you would like to make from it. Will be free of charge and will be fully documented and quality assured. And I will leave it here. And thank you very much for your attention. I hope that you enjoyed the webinar. And if you have any question, please write in the question and answer.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Nube, for adding all this very useful details about the service. So I'm just going to show again the agenda for today. We'll have now a little poll just to make the webinar a little bit more interactive. And so we now ask Elena if you can start to launch these questions. We have 5 multiple choice questions. and one free question. They are pretty easy, but we'll read them out as well. So we'll have them also on the recording if you're going to watch, or other people will watch. So Elena, if you can start the poll. I don't see it at the moment.
Alberto, can we do it later, please?
Sure, yes.
Maybe
okay.
after the presentation session. Thank you.
No problem, no problem. Okay. Okay, so that's just to keep you here with us. So now you're now curious enough about the poll, and you wait for that to happen later. So we'll now move to the first presentation about energy indicators. Like I said, today we focus on hydro power indicators and electricity energy demand. The first one is on hydropower, and specifically the global hydropower energy indicator with Giovanni Aldrigo of the Inside Climate Service. And before we start, we just go through a little bio. So the Giovanni is a data engineer at Inside Climate Service, having joined about nearly 2 years ago, and now is and after finishing a degree in environmental engineering. So both in BSc and Masters at the University of Trento, which provides a very strong background in the topic that we are discussing here. In fact, one work on for his dissertation was on related to hydropower. So it's a pleasure to welcome you, Giovanni, and hand you over, and I will stop share now.
Thank you very much, Alberto. I will now share the screen. You let me know if there are any issues, but you should now be able to see the screen. So thanks again for the nice introduction. I'm Giovanni from ICS, as Alberto said, and I'm going to be talking a bit about the global hydropower indicator. So I'll walk you through a bit of an outline. So the first thing we'll see very briefly is why we need a statistical model to model hydropower. We'll see the approach we use to model it over Europe, which you see is different from the countries outside of Europe at the moment, mainly due to the data availability. And we'll see a bit the latest developments, mainly for the global domain. And finally, a few of the next steps that we foresee. So starting from the statistical model, mainly we opted for a statistical one instead of a physical one, so an hydrological model, because of the availability of data or the scarcity of detailed plant level data, such as head, specific technology of the plants, data on the artificial regulation, which would be needed to drive such a model, a physical model, and also the big domain, which is the global one, which would require very high computational resources to employ such a model. Furthermore, we let's say there have been obtained some very satisfactory results in the past using a machine learning model to predict hydropower generation at a country level over Europe. And so strong of this work, which you can see the in the bottom here. So paper from Linho et al. We opted for this in fact statistical model. You will see, however, that we have two different approaches. Again, one for Europe and one for the globe. And this is mainly due to the higher temporal resolution available for European countries, thanks to the platform made available by ENTSO-E, the energy transmission and system operator for Europe. And while for the globe, mainly we could find data monthly resolution with a few exceptions, but this is what we are working with right now. So we'll see that for at the moment we're using we calculated this proxy for hydropower, which is called installed capacity weighted precipitation, or for short IWP. And so we'll see both of them, starting from the first, so the one over Europe. So as I said, the data we're starting with are generation data, and these are available split into different technologies, for example, reservoirs and run-of-river, which are we are targeting. And they're made available through this transparency platform. You see the link below. By ENTSO-E, as I said, the energy transmission system operator for Europe. And the target resolution we are aiming to is at a spatial resolution of country level and a weekly temporal resolution. You see that at the right hand of the slide, you have just an example of the one time series of generation for France. For the reservoir technology. So you see that this is a weekly time series and it spans from 2015 to 2023. So that's mainly the availability, temporally speaking, of this data. We do also find some countries with less years available. But in any case, this is the starting point. And so these generation data are the, let's say, target variables of this statistical model. The statistical model we are using is the random forest regression model. So it's a machine learning model based on ensemble learnings. So it trains several decision trees over a data set of predictors of mainly temperature and precipitation in order to be able to predict, estimate the generation at country level. So these trees are trained for each specific country and each specific technology. And the output is then averaged for each country and technology to obtain the final, let's say, output estimate. So the starting, let's say, the starting point from which the model learns from is temperature and precipitation data. And these come from the ERA5 reanalysis, which you may all know from the C3S. And these data sets are aggregated at country level as a preprocessing step, this to match the spatial resolution of the target variable. And they are furthermore lagged in time, meaning that for precipitation, we're not just counting for, let's say, instantaneous precipitation or the precipitation occurring over a week, but we're accumulating also over time, going back in the past over several weeks. This to take into account the history of these variables. And so we're doing the same for temperature, but just averaging instead of accumulating. So the model has several predictors then with different lags, as I said, and it learns from them how to predict this generation data. So once the model is validated and trained on the ERA5 dataset over the period which I mentioned before, so 2015, 2023 mainly, we can the model can be driven with different datasets. So again, the ERA5, but with the full let's say time span. So going from 1950 to 2023, as Nube said earlier, but also CMIP6 projection models. So spanning from 2015 to 2065 at the moment, but they'll go up to 2100 later in the contract. and then also seasonal forecasts and hindcasts. So again, the three data sets that are obtained this way are the historical reconstruction, the estimates for the projections, and the seasonal forecast, all in under the format generation. So very briefly, walk you through the leave 1 year out procedure that we use for validation. So we're training the model on all years of data available, again, for each technology and for each country, and testing then the model on 1 year, which is the test year, and calculating several metrics. And we're doing the same then for year 2 available, year 3, and so on until we do have an estimate for the entire time series. So at this point, for example, we see for France reservoir, we have in red the estimate, the estimation by the random forest model, and in gray the observed data from the transparency platform. So once the model is validated and trained on year 5, as I said, it can be driven by different data sets. And so here we have an example of a annually aggregated time series produced for, again, France, run-of river this time. And we have in blue the model driven by, the output of the model driven by the year 5 data set. And in several line styles, different colors, we have different climate projections coming from the CMIP6 ensemble, and addressing, in particular, in this case, the SSP3 7.0 scenario. So this is just to show an example of the results, and again, an example for the seasonal forecast. So in this case, the model is driven, in this example, by the ECMWF seasonal hindcast for September 2016. But it's also, we are also using some reanalysis data in order to be able to compute the lags for temperature and precipitation, in order to have data prior to the initialization date of the forecast. And yes, you can see in light blue all the members of the hindcast, and in darker color, so darker blue, the ensemble mean. So we're running the model individually for each member. So, okay, so passing now to the global approach. As I said, in this case, we're using this proxy for hydropower, which is the installed capacity weighted precipitation. And we're using this mainly, yes, because of the lack of high resolution data, but we'll see, we're working on that a bit later. And you will see that this takes into account both installed capacities, hydropower installed capacities, and precipitation. So merges the two information to try and obtain an informative variable. So the installed capacity at plant level are made available. For example, we're using the Global Energy Monitor dataset. It's a nice dataset. It has all the major power plants around the globe, and so you can see an example here to the right of operating plants and plants that are in construction. And this dataset is really useful to see how the plants are distributed within one country. And this is the main point here. Yes, you see both operating and in construction. So there's some additional information on the plants that are nice. So we're retaining among all the different stages that you see here, the operating and in construction plants for the 3 streams. And from this information, what we do is we basically assign all the plants to a specific country, and this both using the location of the plant that is available and some metadata. So for example, in this country, for this case, the metadata are telling us that this plant that is placed at the border between two different nations redirects the, let's say, the generation both in country 1 and country 2. So we're also taking this into account, and we're also assigning the plant to a specific region within the country. So once we have all the plants, let's say, assigned to a region, we're able to estimate this aggregated install capacity at a regional level. So, well, don't mind too much the acronyms here. So there's the administrative 1 region and NAS 2 regions. For Europe, we're using a bit of a wider regions because the admin ones are very, very little. But in any case, this is important information to have in order to then compute a weighted mean based on the distribution of these install capacities within each country to obtain a proxy at a country level. So once we have obtained this aggregated install capacity, what we do is we take the precipitation data, we aggregate them as well at the regional level, so either at admin 1 or NAS 2, and at the monthly resolution. And at this point, we compute, as we saw earlier for the random forest, a sort of a similar thing. So we compute a accumulated precipitation over 3 months in this case, in order to account for the history of this variable. And we then are able to compute a weighted mean of precipitation to obtain the global proxy, the country level proxy. So again, we produce this data for the 3 streams, so the historical reconstruction, the projection estimates, and the seasonal forecasts. And the units of this proxy will then be millimeters over 3 months. So just to have an example of the output, which is sort of similar to the random forest one we saw earlier. This is again France. And so the upper panel shows the output for both the historical time series and the projected one that we have at the moment. Again, in blue, year 5, and with different colors, the different CMIP 6 models. And you see down here the result obtained with random forest. So they're not the same time series, but this proxy can be informative. And also mind that for some countries, specific countries, European countries, we're computing both the 2, let's say, indicators. So you will be able to compare the 2 also. And this just an example of a seasonal run. So again, September 2016 by ECMWF, using again temperature and precipitation lagged, and again using year 5 to fill in for the lag computations of these variables. And okay, so I guess we can go to the latest development. So last slides, let's say, mainly involving the global approach. So I mentioned there are also nice data sets at a monthly resolution, mainly. And so now we're using this data to both validate the proxy, but also to test the random forest model at this lower temporal resolution, let's say, so monthly, which is giving actually fairly good results. So just to have an idea of the global coverage of these 2 data sets that we're considering, so the EMBER and the IEA, you see there's a wide coverage, but there are, in fact, some gaps, for example, over Africa and over Asia. And you see that the darker, let's say, the color of a country, the higher number of years available on which train the model eventually. And yes, so, and these are, you could see, is the capacity factors, because we're these data sets are, let's say, provided with an annual time series of installed capacity. And so we can say normalize this data to obtain the capacity factors, varying then from 0 to 1. And this allows to better, let's say, validate the proxy. And so, just an example here, this is for Italy. And so you see that this plot, each panel shows two lines, a red one and a blue one. So the red one is the actual hydropower, let's say, observed time series from, in this case, the IEA data set. And you see in blue, let's say, the proxy. These data, however, are mined, they are normalized with the minimum maximum normalization. So they span from 0 to 1. And this, you see how they vary in time. And so you can see that, for example, the very first panel is just comparing the generation data with the simple plain era 5 precipitation data with no lags whatsoever. So we see that the two don't really go hand in hand. Let's say the proxy improves if we start considering some accumulation. So in this case, a 3-month cumulated precipitation, which is shown in blue. The data remains the same underneath, so in red. And if we start considering also how the plants are distributed within the country, we can weight the different regions, the precipitation that's falling on different regions differently, and so take into account also this additional information and improve again the proxy. However, so this 2 to 3 months was kept because it was the one working better globally, let's say. But for some countries, we are considering a longer time spans on which to accumulate precipitation in order to bring, yes, a more informative proxy. So this is just an example for Chile. And here again, you see the proxy in blue and in red, the generation time series. So you see there's a shift here, which can be adjusted if we consider a different number of months on which we can accumulate precipitation. So again, the strength of the random forest model is that we can use different lags and let the model understand what is more useful to keep. And in fact, this last example, last example for Bulgaria. In this example, we see in the upper panel let's say the proxy considering a month, 2 months of lag, and down here considering 7 months. And so we see that there is some information to be taken in both cases. And again, this is the strength of the random forest. And we have a test here which we run at a monthly resolution for again for Bulgaria. And so we can see that the agreement is quite improved, and also the score. I don't know if you're familiar with the NSE, the National Cliff Efficiency Metric, is used in hydrology, but we're also computing others. Yes, this is just to showcase an example. And so, yeah, the main next steps are testing different lags for this hydropower proxy for the different countries in order to improve, let's say, the representativeness of this variable, understanding the difference between these global data sets. There are others, and we have to decide which ones to use outside of Europe for each country. Will probably be a mix of them. And yes, start implementing the random forest model also at a monthly scales for data that do have some generation available, time series available. So that is all. Thanks for listening, and please write questions in the chat, and I'll be here to respond together with other colleagues offline. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Giovanni. That was really good. And very good overview of different approaches we're using for hydropower. The questions are starting to come in, so please add other questions, and we start to respond to them. One has been responded, and others will keep it for later. And we are now ready for the poll. So if we now showing on the screen, if you can please be active and respond to the poll as we go, so we can also save a bit of time. I will read the questions, so while you respond, maybe it's out of sync, but it's probably useful for the audio, like I said, or the recording. The first question is, which of the following energy indicators are you mostly interested in? And you can select whichever is applicable. It's a multiple choice, so it's wind power, solar PV power, hydropower, or electricity demand. The second question, which spatial scales are you mostly interested in for the energy indicators? Again, you can select all applicable, multiple choice. The first choice is individual power plants. The second, regional, so district averaged, country averaged. The third one is grid data, and the fourth option, I'm not sure. Third question, which temporal resolution are most relevant for your work in terms of energy indicators? Again, multiple choice. First, hourly. Second, daily. Third, weekly. Fourth, monthly. And fifth, annually. Fourth question, which type of hydropower generation is most relevant for your applications? Again, multiple choice. First, reservoir. Second, run-of-river. Third, pumped hydro. And fourth, I'm not sure. Fifth question, which type of demand or consumption is most relevant for your applications? Again, multiple choice. First one is electricity. Second, gas. Third, energy. And fourth, I'm not sure. Lastly, an open question. Are there other energy indicators you're interested in? If so, which ones? And you have a little space for your answers. So we leave it open for another minute or two. And we'll go to the presentation, introduction of the presentation. Okay, are we ready? Do we have enough responses? So another 10 seconds, please, if you can complete as much as you can. It's 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, that's good. Thank you very much to those of you who have responded, and you can actually see the results also on the screen. Again, thank you for your input. That's very useful for the also future developments of the C3S Energy Service. We'll always consider all the feedback we receive and discuss internally to see what can be done to address your responses and suggestions. And you can also add, if you have other suggestions, please add them also on the question and answer box. We move on to the next presentation on electricity demand modeling, the generalized additive models with Henry Upton from EDF. So Henry is a data scientist at EDF. Electricité de France for the team Weather, Climate and Renewable Energy Production Forecast. He has a BSc in Economics and Mathematics and an MSc in Statistics and Machine Learning. Currently, Henri is contributing to the C3S energy service for the modeling of electricity demand for European countries using the generalized additive models methodology in the context of seasonal forecast. So it's a pleasure to give you the floor, Henri, and you have 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alberto, for the quick introduction. So I'll share my screen right now. I'll try to move the presentation. I'm trying to put on full screen, but
Control L.
Control L. Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. If you can see my screen right now, I can present a bit. Thanks to Alberto, so you know that I'm working for EDF, Électricité de France. I'm part of the climate and weather forecast service at the R&D of EDF. And so I'll present in a nutshell the different contributions of EDF for this big project for C3S. And more precisely, the electricity demand modeling based on the particular methodology that we use at EDF, which is called generalized additive models. So I will go through the presentation to present this methodology and the applications with the data. So to put the things more in a context, we want to produce aggregated electricity demand forecasts. So aggregated in the mean that it sees a national rise. We want to produce electricity demand forecast for a group of European countries. So actually we have 33 European countries that we produce the demand forecast. And for this, we use two different types of data. We use obviously the historical national electricity load. And the second group of features that we use are the weather indicators, so meteorological indicators, and more precisely, three different variables. Thanks to the process of ICS. So we use wind speed, solar irradiance, and temperature. So finally, to produce the forecast, as I said, we use this methodology of generalized additive models. So to present all the process, I will focus on the last work we did at EDF in the last months for the use case of the seasonal forecast that we presented before. So seasonal forecast is for forecast for each month for a horizon time of 7 months. So we have for the use case, three different input data streams from meteorological data. We have a seasonal forecast for the ECMWF, from CMCC, and from DWD. So for each of these input data, we want to produce incasts and forecasts. And so, as I said, it's each month. So we need to provide each as many forecasts as we have of months from the incast, so from 1993 to 2016. We also have a certain numbers of scenarios that we call members. So we want to produce one single forecast for the number of members that we have. So it varies, the number of scenarios varies from regarding the different the input streams. And at the end, I recall, we want to produce as many forecasts that we have of countries, one forecast by countries. So to present a bit the format of the data we have. So for the meteorological data, we take as input the data that comes out of the processing of ICS that we presented during the introduction. So in each file, so we receive one CSV file per meteorological variable. So we have 3 different files per month. So one file for temperature, one file for wind speed, and one file for solar irradiation. So we have the provenance of the data. So here SAMWF, the indicator of the variable. So here GHI is for solar irradiance. We have also the start date and the end date of the seasonal forecast. The time step, which is 1 day for the solar irradiance, and the horizon, which is 7 months, as I said. And we have the number, the indicator of the scenario, which is 50 there. Sorry. And in the CSV file, we have so the daily observations for each countries in column of the interest variable. So we will take it as input of the model with also the demand that comes from ENSOE platform, as for hydro that Giovanni presented. So we can see on the left that we can query the data, the demand data for each country. So that's the main process we do as pre-processing for the demand data. And after we analyze the data, the quality of the data we queried. So we can split the different countries into 3 different cases, because we have 24 countries for which we observe a consistent amount of data and a very good quality of data. So we have also another category, which is 10 countries that are need to be a bit pre-processed in order to give as input for the training of the model. And we have 5 other countries that are very difficult to handle because of the quality of the data from ENSOE. So to have a clear overview of the process, so to recap, we have the 3 meteorological CSV file for start date and member number. So for the meteorological variable, we pre-process it. So we to give it as simple for our model, we need a daily observation, so we aggregate it if needed. We also check for the units. We need particular units for each measures of the weather data. We do a very quick test to check that the data is okay. And then we give it as input to a pre-trained model. So each model country that has been trained on the respective demand, historical demand that we get from ENSOE. And then at the end, we produce the forecast file. So I recap, we have also, we do this for each data stream. So EWF, CMCC, and DWD for each country, for each start forecast date and member number. So we have a lot of operation to do. So we automatize the process and we parallelize the operations in order to have an operational phase that is quite consistent. So to speak now about the model, the typology of model. So the GAM models, it's a semi-parametric approach that aims, so that's composed of nonlinear effects. And we aim to, at the end, represent our target. Here it's the load with different interactions of variables. So we have temporal effects. So we have a general trend. We have also seasonalities because electricity demand is very fluctuant over the years, over the weeks. So we need to have calendar effects in order to produce very consistent forecasts. And we also have, of course, the weather effects. So here it's cloud effect, but we replace cloud effects by the solar irradiance. And we give it all as inputs in the model. So to speak mathematically, what is GAM model? So we have our features, X, so the calendar effects, so temporal features, and we have also weather features, and we wanted to represent our target, so the load, Y, as an intercept plus a composition of splines. Each splines is a composition itself of coefficients times basis functions. So basis function is an input of the model. It's a generic form, a function form that we will compose and adjust with coefficients regarding our input data. So we sum the effects of each splines at each time step in order to reconstruct in black here a consistent forecast based on target loss that we want to minimize. So it's an optimization process. And at the end, we do this for each country. So for example, for Norway, sorry, we have a very low error. So we split the data into two sets, a training set first to train the model, and then a validation set to test the model to see if the model performs well on unseen data. So we basically take the last observation year for validation data and all the rest for training. And so we see that we do a very low error on the two sets and either the validation data. So it's quite consistent. And here we can see the performance of each model. So in rows, we have the countries and we have the percentage of error because we take the MAPE, the mean absolute percentage error. So basically, we compute the absolute difference between the observations and the forecasts, and we divide it by the observations in order to have the percentage of error in mean. And we can see that except some little countries, we produce very, very low error. And so we have a very consistent results. And to finish, the next steps for us is to update models with training and validation set that are more recent, because as we see, we took pre-COVID demand data. We want to take into account the new structure of the demand, because we know that COVID changed a lot the structure of the electricity demand. And so as we will train on more recent data, we will obtain better results, and will take it as input, the new models, as soon as possible, in order to have a more consistent performance on the new structure, actual structure. And next also is to do some programming work in order to transcript from R scripts that we use for the forecast actually, and for model designing, to turn it into C++ for execution and sharing purposes. So that's the end of the presentation. If you have any question, don't hesitate to put in the chat. And then thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Henri, to cover most aspects of electricity demand. Of course, there is a lot more, but it's difficult to present everything in 15 minutes. So I'll move to the next presentation, which I will give, which is on still on electricity demand, but it's actually a bit broader than that. It's also including energy demand, and it's basically complementary presentation to what Henri presented in a similar way to what Giovanni presented. Giovanni presented both Europe and global data sets. And but the ICS is looking after this indicator for the global electricity energy demands are presented. But I want to thank for the work in this presentation, Letizia Lusito, Stefano Cordedu, Penny Burman, and Elena Restivo for the work and also material that you will see here. So the issue is with why we have this different approaches for electricity demand is because when we move from Europe, so the current operational system is for Europe only, and now we are developing the one for the globe. There are a lot of issues, particularly in terms of data, as already for Europe, as you saw also in the presentation from Henri, there are issues with demand data for Europe. And when we go outside of Europe, it's even more problematic. And obviously the scale of the problem is even larger. So yeah, that's why we need to look at different approaches. And also the commonality between demand and hydropower is that they rely on data. So it's not, we're not using physical models. They would be very hard to build. It's in principle possible for hydropower, but it's yeah, it's impossible to develop models for each hydropower plant. So that's why we take an aggregate approach for countries. And the same is for demand here. So so we have this issue of the size of the problem, so global, and the availability, quantity, and quality of the, in this case, electricity demand. And that's why for this global case, we ended up using a proxy similar to what was done in hydropower. So the proxy is called energy degree days, and it's a sum, it's essentially the sum of the heating degree days, which are very common, and cooling degree days, as you see here. And this is also an approach used that has been adopted recently in the last couple of years by the International Energy Agency, and they provide this data at the link provided here. So the main approach here that is presented is 18 degree days, but we also take into account all the data sources that are available. So the 18 degree days, sorry, the energy degree days composed of the two components are not using actual energy data. They're based on climate data only. Also because I should stress the scope, the main purpose of the C3S Energy Service is to study the role of climate on the energy indicators. So we emphasize particularly what role the climate variables have on the energy indicators. And it's particularly difficult for demand because there are many factors that come in, also other indicators, but demand obviously has effects from population, the GDP, and various other aspects that we won't discuss here now. But we do, like I said, look at the data that are available. We did a good scan of the global data, and this is the table that contains the recent most updated data we found. If you see some gaps, yeah, please feel free to let us know if you know of other data sets we may use. But as you can see, the main data set, the most with most coverage, also hourly data, is the ENSTO-E, which we already use for the European domain. When we go outside, then the best we can find is monthly data. And normally it's annual data. So when it's annual data, it's really not sufficient for the type of modeling we want to do. Monthly could be fine, and we are considering that as well. But that would be in a second phase of the development. Then there is a case of Australia, for example, has through the Australian Energy Market Operator, they actually provide half-hourly data, but it's only for one country, as far as we know. At least this is about data that are publicly available. We know there are data sets, of course, that exist, but they're not in the public domain. Okay, so we know what the data are, but well, like I said, we then go straight to this energy degree day indicators, and the first component is the heating degree day, and this is a climate indicator that is used in the estimation of the needs and demand of energy for heating purposes. There are several operational definitions for this indicator. But currently, we define heating degree days as the monthly sum of the daily difference between a reference temperature, which is perceived as comfortable, and daily average of the outside temperature up to meter height. But only when the 2 meters succeeds a threshold temperature, which define the heating days throughout the year according to the following definition. So I won't spend too much time on the definition. Here it is, you'll find in the slides later and also in the recording. So these are pretty simple definitions. We come up then with monthly data because to accumulate the days, heating degree days, you need a certain period, and the standard one is to take monthly periods. So we get monthly values of HDD, the heating degree days. And cooling degree days is kind of mirror image of heating degree days, and is here defined as the monthly sum of the daily difference between a reference temperature and the daily average of the outside temperature. So very similar to the heating degree days, but here is when the temperature exceeds a threshold temperature, a condition that defines the cooling days throughout the year. And again, similar and specular definition for the cooling degree days. Once we have the heating degree days and the cooling degree days, we then simply take the sum, and that's our heating energy degree days. Formally, this is the flow that we follow. So we start from gridded data at the resolution of quarter degree grid, which is the ERA 5 grid. And so it's all pretty simple. The main thing to note is that when we present the data aggregated at country level, because for demand, normally the indicator is provided at country level. When we do the aggregation, we actually use a population gridded product data set, which is used as a weight to the indicator. So the HDD and the CDD are weighted according to the population on those countries, and then the country averages are generated. The other important aspect also that has been mentioned, but just to stress again, the approach we take in the C3S Energy Service is that we do the training or the preparation of the indicators, the base indicators on the historical period, and then the same approach is applied to the seasonal forecast stream and the projection stream. Today we saw some aspects of it, but basically because of lack of time, we couldn't show all the streams, but all the streams will be available based on the definitions we've seen. So for electricity demand, we'll have two approaches, one for Europe and one for the globe, given by this energy degree days. And then we do some validation. The first step is to make sure that what we compute is very close to what the International Energy Agency produces with the data set I showed before. So without going through all the text here, just want to show you that we get very, very similar results, and differences are mainly to do with the averaging of over countries, so boundaries and so on, so very minimal differences. So this is just a sanity check, really. But then we also do a check on the data. So this is a more interesting comparison, and we take the energy degree days and compare to the actual energy demand that we get from one of the data sets I showed at the beginning. And we can see that actually for France, we get a very close agreement between EDD and actual energy demand. For Germany, it's not too bad, but not as good as France. But then when we go to other countries like Colombia or Chile, the differences start to become a bit more accentuated. So we don't expect a too exact match because, of course, EDD is a proxy and it's not an exact representation of demand, but we would like them to be as close as possible, at least in terms of the interannual variability. So we're working also to try to get as close as possible to this energy demand. And for future development, we were also looking and started to work on this aspect of including a slightly more complex definition of the heating degree days and cooling degree days, which include the relative humidity through the so-called heat index, which is an index developed by the US Administration for Atmospheric Sciences, Ocean Atmospheric Sciences, back in 1978. And this combines the effects of air temperature and relative humidity into a single parameter that provides a measure of the perceived temperature. And here is the definition and how it is computed through this workflow. Okay, so this is that was work in progress, and I'd like to stop there and thank you for your attention. And we now switch to the question and answer session. So I see that there was yeah. So if I thank you, Nube, for coming back in. Also, Giovanni, Henry, let's see if there are questions. So we leave a little time to our audience to type their questions. In the meantime, I note that 2 questions have already been answered, and there is an additional question from Basileios, who's asking about data assimilation. So I can address this. So data assimilation is not part of the service. Data assimilation is done for data sets like ERA5 or like weather forecast or even seasonal forecast. But what we do in this service is we take the output of those models as they are. We're not doing the actual physical modeling of the variables. But what we do is then we do some bias adjustment, because from all these models, they don't always represent reality as it should, but they're close enough. We just need to adjust them a little bit to get them closer to reality. And the details of this procedures for bias adjustment were actually discussed in the first webinar. So the recording is available, also the presentation. So if you're interested, I invite you and everybody to go to web pages, and you also receive a link after the presentation with the information where to find the recording and the presentations. Okay, so if that has not answered the question, please come back on the Q&A. And we now have a question for Henri. Is it possible to do embedded C programming using Keel software? I'm not familiar with the Keel software for distribution purposes to carry out the energy modeling.
Yeah,
if you're
I'm not
able to
familiar
answer,
with
yes.
Kill software again also, but I can check. The idea is basically to obfuscate the code in order to, as in R programming, we just have all the knowledge of the code. We need to obfuscate it for some distribution purpose and confidentiality interest. And so that's why the idea of turn the R programming, the scripts, the R scripts into C++ scripts in order to have an executable. It's the idea behind this, but currently I'm not working on this part of the project. But we'll surely check for the Kill software because I'm not familiar with this, and I will check. So thank you very much for the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Henri, for addressing that. I don't see any more questions. So unless there are comments from the presenters, additional things you want to say in response to the questions you already answered, I don't know if you want to complement what you wrote, Giovanni or Nube.
Yes, regarding the, maybe I can complement a little bit, but regarding how to open or visualize the NetCDF data set. So there are quite a few software already. I have mentioned Panoply for visualizing the NetCDF data, but I just forgot to mention there that maybe you can use also ncdump. This is a line command in which you can see the header of the NetCDF and obtain a lot of information regarding the NetCDF just in a line command. But of course, always you can use RStudio, or you can use Python in order to open the NetCDF and visualize plots and do also calculation on top of that. But I'm pretty sure also that there are some other software. Then you can give a look on just Googling and you can find more.
Okay, good. Thank you. Giovanni, would you like to add
Yeah,
something?
I think I answered to Doug's question. But please, if you're here still, you can. I mean, if there's something else you want to know, or it'd be nice to know, for example, if you're really interested in pumped hydro. Because as I told him, we're actually working on specifically open loop pumped hydro over Europe with European TSOs, because it's a technology that needs a bit more data than what is usually available publicly, and but we've had some good, let's say, good feedbacks and in contacts with these TSOs in order to be able to use some of their data which you wouldn't find, for example, on the transparency platform. And so this really helps in improving the modeling for these technologies, both for pumped hydro, but also for reservoir technology. Yes, but so if there's any more question about this, I can try and answer.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Giovanni. We also received another question, which is maybe addressed to, I don't know, Nube, if you want to respond to this one, or I can try as well. So Anonymous is asking, how will you update the output of the models when new improvements will be available? So it's a very important question, and
Yes.
maybe Nube, you can start.
Yes, thank you for this question. As I said during my presentation, we are developing right now the second phase of the operational services for the energy sector, and we are making some improvements in the modeling, and also we are extending the service for the global domain, and also including a new temporal stream that is the seasonal prediction. So basically, as soon as we have all the first result in place and also quality check and well documented, we will be publishing it at the Copernicus Climate Store at the C3S. And this, I think, hopefully, this will be happening somewhere between after summer and the end of the year. And most probably it could be that we have a first version maybe by the end of the year, and then by September or so of the following year, maybe we still have time to include a few more improvements. But yes, this is what we can say. I don't know if my colleague would like to add something else.
From my side, I think, no, I think you answered very well. So I would leave it there. And maybe we can ask also, I actually had a question for Henri on I think, I mean, it applies also to hydropower to some extent, but so what happens, and maybe it wasn't clear in the presentation, but maybe you can clarify what happens when we don't have good enough data from ENSTOI in Europe for electricity demand. How do we model demand for those countries?
Yeah, sure. For these countries, so to recap, we have some countries for the input data from ENSTOI is not consistent, so we can't apply the GAM methodologies to train a very performant model. And so for this, we use the other methodology that has been presented by Alberto, which is the EDD methodology for operational purpose, in order to have at least one forecast per European countries. So that's it.
Yeah, I can answer for
Yes,
the
Giovanni, yes.
hydro part. Well, similarly, I can answer similarly to what Henri said. If there are cases in which the generation data are maybe available, but sometimes also only a few years are available. And so in that case, we still produce the model outputs, but we are careful about what we obtain in the validation, for example, as a result. And so in those cases, even if we give the model output, we also give the proxy for hydropower. And in some cases, actually, for example, mainly in Europe, because we have direct contact with these transition system operators, as I mentioned, we try and interact as much as we can because sometimes it happens that you might have publicly available data that are not that have inconsistencies, for example, between generation data and install capacity data or time series. And so in that case, it's really important to engage with these users in order to be able to improve the data, or at least have a way to a channel with which we can reach more informative data, more correct and reliable data that might be available, just maybe not publicly.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Giovanni and Harry. And I think we're getting close to the end of the 90 minutes we had allocated for this webinar. So I just want to remind you about the presentations we heard today. This is the agenda, just to refresh our memory, and particularly to thank all the speakers. Thank you very much for your great contributions. And again, thanks also to Elena for working behind the scenes. Looking forward, this is what will happen about this webinar series. We've done the first 3 webinars, so they're crossed. Now there's going to be the fourth webinar is going to be towards the end of the year. We'll advise people, particularly if you also provided permission to contact you for related webinars when you registered for this one. So the next one is about the case studies. There are 2 case studies that run together with the C3S Energy service. So they are integral part of the service, in fact. This will be presented towards the end of the year. And then at the beginning of next year, we'll give an update on where we are with both climate and energy products. And we'll see whether this will need to be split again into more than one webinar, or just leave it as one. So with that, I'd like to thank you, everybody, for the participation through the questions and the poll, and also for being here in the middle of the summer. And I wish you a good rest of the summer, and stay tuned. And if you want to also be informed about activities of Copernicus at ECNWF, more generally, not just the Copernicus Climate Change Service, here are some links and handles and so on. And you will receive an email from us also with indications, like I said, about recording and presentations in the next week or so. So thank you very much again, everybody, and see you at the next webinar.